This girl just randomly didn't even say hi, didn't even know who I was. She's like, "You're so white, you don't even look Muslim." Tone Trump, mashallah, may Allah bless him. He calls me his twin, but I think probably sarcastically.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of our listeners and viewers. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to my young guest tonight, Brother David Williamson.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Good to talk to you, Asad. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So alhamdulillah, the good thing is I've already met Brother David in person. So one of the things with the Straight Path podcast is, this has always been sort of like a knowledge seeking process and a knowledge seeking project. And I feel like your story is one that people can benefit from because subhanAllah, you're a young guy who converted to Islam. You have a beautiful project you're working on, which is called Audio. Brother David converted to Islam approximately 3 years ago. He's from the DMV area originally. He's currently a student at UPenn. So you became Muslim 3 years ago, subhanAllah. Yep. You're pretty active on the dawa scene now. You do dawa tables at the university and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is mashallah pretty good, or very good, not pretty good. That's very good. Allah subhanahu wa taala give you strength and continue to give you the ability to do that.
Ameen.
You travel a little bit, not a lot, I feel like, but you travel a little bit. Like you came when Ikna was in town, you came down. Were you there that weekend, or you came down specially for that?
So I have a friend who lives about 10 minutes away from Baltimore, so I stay with him for the night. But honestly, even I didn't, like, Baltimore is only like an hour away from DC. So it's not too bad.
So before we get into your conversion story, I do want to get an idea. Was your family more friendly towards Muslims before you became a Muslim?
Yeah, so my family, like, can't imagine they had any problem with Muslims. I mean, they're very nice, decent people. Like, they're not bigoted at all. Like, they're not going to be going around like, hey, what are these brown people? Or whatever. Like, no, they're very fine people. Like, it's just they didn't really know anything about Islam. They didn't really. They were exposed to some Muslims, but they didn't really know. Like, what is this religion? Like, actually, just because there's a lot of misinformation out there about. This.
Alhamdulillah. And is it true you've been told you look too white to be Muslim?
Oh yeah, at the IGNA convention, I went in and I sat down in the front row. And then I'm sitting there and like I was wearing like my suit, right? This girl just randomly didn't even say hi, didn't even know who I was. She's like, "You're so white, you don't even look Muslim." I was like, what? Like, it just caught me so off guard. I was like, okay, like I just started laughing. She just like stared at me always. She's like, "Oh, like my mom's white too." I was like, that makes it even weirder. Like it was quite. I like left very shortly afterwards. I was like, "Assalamualaikum." Like it was
quite the experience.
Yeah, no, it's like I get so many weird looks. Like it's just so funny. Like Tone Trump. Mashallah, may Allah bless him. He calls me his twin, but I think probably sarcastically, if I'm guessing. But he came. He gave a halaqah. We had a YM meeting.
Okay.
And he gave out the halaqah. Mashallah, very good. He's a great brother. Mashallah, he's very good with the youth. And he posted on his Instagram because I met him at the IGNA convention. He was like,
"Yeah, you did."
He was like, when this brother came out to me. My security thought he was Fed/police, not gonna lie. I was like, no. He was like, you're just like so white. Like it's not just that like
white God.
No, it was hilarious. Everyone was dying in the comment section. But I've kind of just learned to embrace it at this point because I think it's a huge part of who I am as a person. And it's kind of unfortunate we even have to say this, but like, I said like, oh, I'm proud to be a white American. It's like, oh, yeah, it's just like
that's who you are.
Exactly, yeah. Like a black person was like, I'm proud to be black. I'm like, good, like Allah created everybody differently. If someone's like, I'm proud to be Chinese, like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just it only becomes problematic when you start thinking you're better than other people.
Yeah.
Color, but it's just like I feel like. Especially now with like the racial climate we live in, like if white people even say that, for some reason there's just this automatic assumption like, oh,
Negative connotations.
yeah, it's like, oh, that he's one of those people. It's like, no.
SubhanAllah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you and make it easy for all people who are Muslim and who come to Islam.
I mean, 100%.
So I want to hear your conversion story. So like with Tyler, when we were talking about his story, he was like, I really wasn't thinking about Islam, and then he found a Quran under a coffee table, right?
Wow.
Some people have interesting stories like that. Other people, they have some, something weird happens. They meet some Muslim somewhere and they become Muslim. So they're not all stories aren't supposed to be like, oh wow, this happened. Some stories are very like subtle, like how a person came to Islam, but somebody can learn a lesson from it. That somebody may be on a similar journey as you are, and they may be like, hey, that story makes so much sense to me. Maybe Islam is for me. So this is why people shouldn't always become like, like, oh my God, it has to be a great story, otherwise it's not worth listening to. Everybody's story is worth listening to. So I want to hear your story.
Yeah, Bismillah. So I'd say it kind of starts when I was around 14 years old, maybe 13, 14, yeah. And I was kind of looking for like moral discipline. I was looking for higher purpose in my life. I remember I always believed in God since I was young, but I just had like these experiences where I started wanting to become closer to God. Like I remember I was playing football in my 8th grade year, and I like badly hurt my shoulder. Like I was making a tackle and it didn't dislocate, but I like injured like my AC joint, like right here. And I remember like I just turned to God and I started praying. It was actually in the shower. It was weird, but like I just prayed to God, and I was thanking him for doing it. I didn't really know where that like came from. Like I don't even know what it just at the time. I didn't really know why I did it. I just felt like the right thing to do. But I started, and sort of through that, like later on, I was thinking about like, okay, I kind of want to become more religious. Like I believe in God, and I think God is important. And it is obviously at the time, I didn't know, but at the time it was like, it's my fitrah, like it was kind of awakening, I guess. And I was just looking for higher purpose. And eventually we read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And, that book has inspired countless people to become Muslim. And, I was reading it, and obviously like the first big part of his life, the big part of the portion is talking about him in the Nation of Islam. And he refers to obviously white people as like the blue-eyed blonde devils and whatnot, which, kind of looks like me. So, but I was despite that, I was really impressed by like how Islam just transformed his life. It gave him these morals, it gave him this discipline, it gave him this sense of purpose. And then, especially at the last chapter, he describes Mecca, right? And he describes all the different races of people, all different cultures coming together and being united by Islam and being united by the worship of one God. And he also describes like, I saw Muslims, their hair was the blondest of blonde, their eyes were the bluest of blue. And I'm like, wait, that's me, And it's like, I had this I think most people, like, especially white people, have this perception of Islam as like, oh, that's a religion for those people. It's a religion for like people in Asia or like brown people or Arabs or whatever. And it's because like they don't really see white Muslims, right? And so Malcolm X describing that, it actually made me think, okay, this is actually a path I can pursue. So then from there, I started researching Islam more. I started reading about it, and I found it. I love the discipline aspect of it. I love the close relationship with God, the intimate relationship with God through prayer and all these, like the spiritual. I'm like, this is perfect. Like, yeah, like you have to connect with God and do all these things. It should be that way, And then I started reading like a lot of the arguments, especially during COVID. Like there's so much extra time on my hands. So I just went down the rabbit hole of just reading all the different arguments and whatnot and all the online debates and stuff like that. And it took me a while, but eventually I read Al-Rahiq al-Makhtoum, the Sirah book, and I just read about the Prophet ﷺ's life, and upon just seeing who he was, his sincerity, how much he gave up for his mission, how he was able to do it, and how he was triumphant. I'm like reading a hero story, and I'm like, this man was truthful. Like there's no other explanation. Like I just became convinced, and developed so much love for this man. And shortly afterwards, like, I accepted Islam. That was kind of like the final thing that pushed me over the edge.
Subhanallah. That's very nice.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. But it was interesting because I was actually practicing certain elements of Islam, like I was praying and whatnot. So I got to sort of feel like the rituals. I fasted a few times just to sort of see what it was like.
There's actually a lot of people who like fast and pray before they become Muslim, because those are like, those aren't activities which are exclusive to Islam, like, praying, like, bowing while you pray and stuff like that. You can find in other faiths. Fasting isn't, even in Christianity, in certain branches of Christianity, you'll find them fasting. Judaism, Hinduism, different religions, and they may have different types of fast. So all of these acts are like sort of going towards the same mission, which is to please God. So I can see why those made sense.
It was, for me, it was more so like I just wanted to sort of see what it was like. Okay, like what is it like to actually do these things? Like what is it like to be Muslim in a sense? Obviously I hadn't declared my belief then, but it was like I sort of was hinging on the fact that I believe. I just hadn't really. I think this is a lot of people, like you're sort of like right there and you're ready to do it, and you just kind of need something to push you over the edge. But eventually I just like, I feel like I knew it was the truth for a while, but I didn't really pull the trigger just because I was worried about like what would my family react and whatnot and stuff like that. Like they knew I was looking into Islam and they didn't have any problems with it, but they were just like, I was young, so I was like, I'm 16, right? And so they're like, they're just kind of worried, like, okay, like, are you really ready to make such a decision at this age?
Yeah, I mean, they might be thinking it's just a phase, like, give it, 2 years, he'll be out of it by then.
My friends thought it was too, because they knew I was interested in Islam. Yeah, a lot of them were like, it's just a phase, he'll grow out of it.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you became Muslim, right?
Yeah.
Where did you take your Shahada at home? Did you go to a masjid? How did that happen?
So it was during like the lockdowns, kind of. Okay. So it was in January 2021.
Okay.
And I actually did it like at my dining room table, like with my family members present.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I told them that I was going to do it this day, and they were like, yeah, like they wanted to see it. So I was like, all right, cool.
And your family, you guys are Christian?
So on paper, but they're not really religious.
Like what kind of? But like still, what kind of Christianity?
Catholic. Oh, so Catholic. I was never baptized personally. My brother was, and both of my parents were, but I was never personally baptized because I was born right after the pedophilia scandals in the church.
Oh, yeah, I forgot how young you are.
Yeah. No, I'm not that old, but like, so they were like really sort of scared about like, okay, like this is not good. Obviously, they were kind of worried about like, okay, could this happen to my son? So they kind of kept me away from the church and whatnot. My brother was baptized, and I don't know if he was confirmed or not, but I never got baptized or anything. So I never really had. I had been to church a few times because I wanted to become like more Catholic or more religious.
Well, I mean, the Washington D.C. area is very heavy Catholic, right?
I'd say most of the people, yeah, it's very heavy Catholic, but like most Catholics I knew, at least in school or whatnot, they're not very religious. So that was another thing that kind of turned me off Christianity, was the fact that like I saw it was really weak. Like if people can just be Christian and they, talk about certain things and whatnot, but then there's no actual stability of morals and whatnot, and people can just do all the things that are not allowed by Christianity and still like they're Christian, it's fine. I'm like, oh mashallah.
I have this I was like, let's change it.
Hey, mashallah. But what was I going? Yeah. I was like, okay, like it doesn't really seem like there's this close sense of like, okay, with Islam, like obviously Muslims aren't perfect, but I'm like, okay, with Islam, you have to actually follow these things. And that can be a turnoff for a lot of people because it's restrictive in a sense. But I don't think that's a bad thing because everybody understands that you need certain guidelines. Like you can't just do whatever you want all the time, or else you're just going to get nothing done. You're never going to live a productive life because, you'll just be like scrolling through Twitter all day or like arguing with people and just like wasting your time. And it's like, that's not a good thing. Everyone understands like, okay, yeah, there's certain things you have to do. Like if you're a person who's big into fitness, like, okay, I have to go to the gym X amount of times per week, or I have to exercise, I have to play sports, stuff like that. If you're really big into school, like you can't just fail every test. Like you have to actually do the work. So with Islam, I was like, okay, like, yeah, if you want to get close to God, like, you have to actually put the work in. If you want to be a religious person, you can't just like believe one thing and then you're good and maybe go to a building once a week. It's like Islam was like, okay, there's a firm structure here. And I understand that, like, I think that can go too far sometimes, because I do see enough struggles is the ritualism. Um, the ritualism where people just focus on doing actions without any putting meaning behind them, and that's why you need spirituality.
Yes, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I'm just that's such a good point that you bring up, that people, they just get very aggressive with the rituals,
Yeah.
but there's no spiritual push behind it. So when there's no spiritual push behind a ritual, eventually you'll get burnt out by doing it if you don't see any results, because then you're looking for physical results and not spiritual results. So it makes a difference. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just like, it's a good way to just frame things, because, and I'm like big into like a lot of the self-improvement type stuff. I was talking to do you know Abu Productive or Muhammad Faris?
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
We can discuss this more when I start talking about my thing. But like I was talking to him the other day, and he was saying, like, I was sort of talking about the fact that, like, he brings a sort of spiritual side to a lot of the productivity stuff, which in a lot of the self-improvement spaces, it's very kind of materialistic, which is, I'd say, the biggest criticism, because then it just leads to narcissism. Because if you just think like, oh, I have to be better, being better, that's all good. At the same time, if you just think about the physical benefits of yourself, you're not focusing on the spiritual benefits of getting closer to God and why you do certain things. Like, people often say, like, oh, don't worry about intention, just do the thing. It's like, Islamically, that we don't believe in that, like, you have to, if you want to have your rewards accepted, obviously when it comes to like dunyawi things, like, you should still do good things anyway, but at the same time, like, you want to work on your intention as well. But in general, like, you want to, having the highest level of faith means you do all your things to please God. And so I think that adding that element, that spiritual element, where you're like, okay, my body is an amanah from Allah. So that's why I want to be in good fitness. That's why I want to be in shape. Not just like, oh, you're in good shape, then people are going to treat you better, blah, blah, blah. It's like, that stuff helps, but that can just be a secondary benefit.
Yeah.
And that's a struggle that everybody goes through. But like, I think that sort of spiritual struggle is incredibly important.
Alhamdulillah. So how did you said you took the Shahada in front of your family.
Yeah.
And you said they sort of knew you were leaning towards it.
Yeah.
Afterwards, how have they seen Islam? Are they seeing it more positively? Are they okay with you being a Muslim? Do they ever ask you questions like something, and I don't think there's any taboo questions to ask, as long as they're with sincerity. People will ask us very weird questions and we're okay with them, but they're coming from a sincere place. So what has that journey been like, the afterwards?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, like, it was honestly the family struggles. Like, I'm blessed as a convert that I didn't really have to deal with that much of it. Mostly it was just
none of that stuff.
Huh?
You don't have to pray in the bathroom or anything that.
No, not at all. Like, I would tell my family, hey, I have to pray, and they'd be okay with it. There'd be like times where it'd be inconvenient, and you could see they'd be like, okay, come on. Like, but I'd say that's pretty rare, and I'm pretty understanding of it. But I'd say in general, like, my family's they're very accepting of me being Muslim. Like, both of my parents, they've seen how it's improved our relationship. They've seen how it's improved my life, and just generally how it's made me better as a person, just because Islam does that to people. And if it's not doing that to somebody, then they should probably I think you should probably look at yourself, because it's a thing. Like, Islam is meant to not make us just these, like, self-righteous, arrogant people. Like, that's not a good thing. Probably. And so I'd say, yeah, they definitely, like, were very, very supportive of me. And initially there were certain things, because I used to be much more strict on a lot of opinions because I didn't really have enough knowledge. And most of the stuff I got was from the internet, so it's kind of heavily dominated by, like, really, really conservative.
That's very common, though. It's not just unique to you, so don't feel bad about that.
Yeah, no, most converts I've talked to have gone through a similar phase. And then you actually meet real people, and then you sort of have to drop it, because it's not sustainable to just be, like, in your own little bubble and being like, oh, I got to be friends with those people because they're innovators or whatever. It's like, no, I wasn't that far into it, don't worry. But, like, it was just like certain opinions. Like I used to be like super strict on like certain things like music or like I'm trying to think of other things. But so my parents were just a little worried that I'd be like too extreme with it. But I think it was just the time helped. Like over time, me being Muslim for quite a long time allowed them to see that I was like, okay, this isn't really manifesting. Because I think is I fit the perfect demographic for somebody who would become like very radical in faith. Like,
I was about to say, I was like, your parents didn't want to see you on CNN.
yeah,
You know, there was this one graphic. I have it saved on my phone somewhere, where it's like 3 white American men joined one of these organizations overseas. You know, terrorist organizations, and it's like, do you know these guys? And all 3 of them had their faces covered with like the what's it called, the Arab headdress, sort of like the whole way, and all you could see were their eyes. And I'm like, how is anybody supposed to identify these guys in these grainy pictures? They're all 3 white guys, but they're like, you can't see them. Well, how are you supposed to identify them?
maybe they wear that like all the time, so it's like it's pretty easy to spot them. Like, hey, what the heck's that white dude doing?
They were
Like,
their
wearing
office. I don't know.
just
Man.
his eyes on the street. We're in America.
Have you ever seen the show? It's called Person of Interest.
No, I haven't.
You need to watch it. That was a good show, especially you know, you're in the DC area. It was a good show. It was a show. It's fictional, but it seemed like it was very real.
What's it called?
Person of Interest.
Person of Interest.
Yeah,
Huh.
it was a good show. It was about what's it called? National surveillance.
Oh,
yeah, but
you maybe those guys are onto something. Like, you wear that like the turban thing like over all your body. Like, how are they supposed to identify you?
I don't know. I don't know. But what's it called? But okay, so your family is pretty fair. Alhamdulillah, that was good. Allah, you know, Allah guide us all, and Allah make it easy for them, inshallah.
I mean,
So what about your friends? Did you lose any friends?
Did I lose any friends? Not really. I'd say my friendships became different with people, and especially in like non-Muslims in high school.
Because you
like my school was like, huh?
Go ahead.
Yeah, my friends like so. I went to like a DC private school, so like it's kind of a weird dynamic because it's very small. So everybody is kind of friends with each other, just to different degrees. Like you can't really like not like someone because you have to be around them like so much that it would just be kind of weird. Like there might have been people that like would piss me off sometimes, but it was just like such a weird dynamic. But like no, people like I didn't lose any friends over being Muslim. Like some friends like respected my Islam a lot. Some people thought it was like just a phase. There would be like certain times where there'd be like controversial points. So like people would be arguing with me about like, oh, what does Islam say about X? And they would get like kind of hated and whatnot. But I'd say overall people kind of respected me for being Muslim. And over time they sort of saw again like that it improved my life and there was a lot of good things that came out of it. But it's just that my friendships became different because like I'd say junior, senior year, which is when I became Muslim junior year, yeah. That's when everybody's like partying and stuff, and that's when that kind of starts in high school. So like everybody would be doing these things. I'd want to hang out with them, but the only occasions they'd be doing it would be parties, and so I couldn't do it. You know, I couldn't go along with them. And so I'd say that kind of made me like it made our friendships different, you know, like there would be times where we'd hang out and I'm still like some of them still pretty close with. Actually, today we old high school football teammate of mine. He goes to Georgetown, and they played Penn today. I was like, I'm just gonna watch the game. Like, why not? And I said hi to him after the game. I hadn't seen him in quite a bit, but alhamdulillah, it was nice. Like, I still like. It's kind of interesting. Like all these people, like I could probably people I haven't seen in a bit. I could probably message them and be like, yeah, let's catch up. It's been so long. Like, but. No, I remember there would be times where like people would think stuff I did was weird, but yeah, like they'd be like, "Oh, like you don't like talk to like female, you have like female friends or whatever." I'm like, I don't really do that, you know. It's not really a thing in Islam, and so, but yeah, so there would be like stuff like that, but I'd say it's pretty rare. And over time, people kind of respected me for being religious and being devoted.
Who won today, Penn or Georgetown?
Penn won. It was a crazy game. They won in overtime.
Oh, really? Overtime?
Yeah, my friend scored the game-tying 2-point conversion
Good
against
for him.
Penn, and then they lost. It was Penn won in overtime. It was crazy. It's a high-scoring game, 42-39.
When we used to be younger, like, my age group, like 35 to 40, right?
Yeah,
When guys like us, we wouldn't talk with girls. People would ask us, like, out of curiosity and sort of like discuss, or like, are you gay? Right? And now, obviously, I don't think people even ask that anymore because they're not really, it's not like a bad thing anymore. So, like, if you don't talk with a girl, they'll be like, oh, well, he might just like guys, or he might not be into anything anymore. Like, they have people who are, what is it called, asexual. So, I guess this LGBTQ stuff, at least because of that, people don't get harassed as much if they don't talk with girls.
yeah. I mean, that might be like at the surface level, but like everybody does make those jokes, like in the real world, like.
Okay,
um,
I don't know what goes on in schools anymore,
no,
so I don't
man.
know.
I don't know. Like some of these people, like they're like, oh my gosh, terrible things said by high school kids. I'm like, you guys clearly haven't been in high school in quite a while. Like high school kids say some pretty weird stuff. Like that is, there's a reason why like you don't hear about a lot of it because they don't share it publicly. Like it's very common for people to just make like jokes and stuff like that. So, but no, I'm on that point. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, we have
So,
our certain
what's it called? So I know you have the project Audio Realm.
yeah.
Is that your entrepreneurial spirit which made you do that? Have you always done little side projects and stuff like that? What is sort of the mindset? What is Audio Realm? Can you explain this? I'm a business guy. I do work for a charity organization, but I still love to do business, love to tinker with business. So for
Yeah.
me, this is really interesting. Like, you're a young guy, mashallah. I love it that you're doing a small business, an online business. It's amazing. I want to hear more about it.
Yeah. So I actually weirdly, I'm not like one of those like guys who's gonna go up on stage like, yeah, when I was 5 years old, like I had a lemonade stand. Like, no, I actually didn't really do entrepreneurial stuff like ever. Like
Oh,
it
you
wasn't
didn't?
really.
Okay.
I'd say my sort of the end of senior year, I sort of here's what's interesting. Like when before I became Muslim, I was really interested in the military.
Okay.
I actually a lot of the things I was looking for sort of in Islam, I found to some extent in the military. So like I was in JROTC,
Okay.
this program called Sea Cadets, which especially in the last couple of years, I've sort of grown to appreciate a lot more.
Okay.
Just because it teaches a lot of great values to young men, especially that kind of military, being in that team, having to just endure a lot of hard stuff, like people yelling at you and like having to observe strict codes and the brotherhood and all that stuff is incredibly important. And I think wish more young men would be able to have experiences like that. So I was sort of involved in that, and actually wanted to be a Navy SEAL. That was what I was looking to do as like a career path. When I became Muslim, I just really kind of put me off of it. Also, some of my experiences within Sea Cadets, like I did this one training out in Iowa, and it was a field operations training. It was actually kind of cool. Like we got trained by Marines, and they were teaching us like infantry skills. We were like sleeping in foxholes and stuff. Like it was hardcore. But like some of the kids in there, like we worked together, but some of the kids in there were just like really, really weird. Like I remember I asked this one dude like point blank. I was like, "Why do you want to join like the army?" He was like, "I just want to kill people." I was like, "Whoa." Also, like I just saw the military. Like when I became Muslim, I'm like, I don't really. This is not an environment I want to be in. If I'm going to be the best Muslim I can be, like this is not like, especially given the fact that a lot of the wars we were fighting were overseas in the Middle East. Like I just wouldn't feel right having to go into combat against other Muslims. And I just feel like I was like, there's better things I could do with my life than that. So then I was like, I kind of in this limbo phase where I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then I figured out, I'm like, entrepreneurship seems really cool. Like the idea of just having, if I want to build a name for myself, be able to build up, have an influence in the world, being able to sort of launch my own venue and whatnot, it sounds really, really cool. And so I was just sort of reading some books on business. There's a really good one I recommend. It's called like The Millionaire Fast Lane by MJ DeMarco. Great book. There's a little bit of that like rich person arrogance in there, but it's other than that, like there's some really good tips. But I sort of was thinking about like entrepreneurial stuff. And around this time, I sort of got into audiobooks. So I was listening to a lot of audiobooks just because I struggled to read physical books. So I was like, okay, just listen to the audios is much easier when I'm in the gym, when I'm, traveling, stuff like that, commuting. It's much easier to listen to stuff. And so then I was like, how come there's no like Islamic ones available? Like, where are they? And then I was like, oh, boom, like this is an interesting opportunity I can explore. So at first I wanted to I was kind of into like the tech stuff. So I was like, I can make like an app for the Islamic audiobooks, and then I'll just convince all these people to make them, and then I'll put them on my app, and I can sell the subscriptions to the app so people can listen to the audiobooks and whatnot. And I had a really, really good friend at Penn the guy I befriended. He's actually he's 24 now, but he was a senior. And the reason why he was a 24-year-old senior is he dropped out for he took 3 gap years, launched a company that eventually sold to Lyft. And then he worked for them for a little bit. And so then he kind of became like a sort of mentor in a sense. And he was like guiding me along the process, like giving me advice and whatnot. I got to a point where he was like, look, you got to do more market research, man. Like, have you actually talked to any of these publishers about audiobooks and stuff like that? Like, why aren't they out there? Like, you have to figure this stuff out before you just start building things. He kind of gave me some tough love, which I really respected, because I like those people that are just very straight shooters. They tell you what it is. And I was working on this app for a while. The app wasn't really working out. I thought I was kind of focusing on a lot of the details like that don't make sense. And so then I called all these publishers, sort of asked them what's going on, like why aren't we making audiobooks, stuff like that. And a lot of them, I found it was more on the production side was the problem, right? So then they specifically the fact that they couldn't really find narrators who could speak Arabic or could pronounce the Arabic terms in all their books. So I was like, okay, it seems like I want to pivot over to the production side. So that's what I ended up doing. So I started I had my website and everything like that. And I just started reaching out to people. I say when I was in school, like towards the end of my second semester last year, this is around April, May, there were like a few leads that were kind of here or there, but they ended up not going through, which alhamdulillah, I actually kind of realized was a blessing, because the thing about audiobooks is narration's a skill. Like being able to read is actually a skill that you have to learn. Like you can't just if the average person just picks up a book and starts reading out of it, you're going to sound like a robot, because most people don't know how to read. You have to engage the listener. So I didn't have that skill at the start. And it's funny, one of the people I won't mention his name, but there was an author that I was trying to convince to do his audiobook, and he sounded like he was really into it. And I listened to some of the samples like a couple months later. I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like it just sounds like so robotic. There's no sense of engagement or anything. And I'd say around May, that's when I first started reaching out seriously over the summer. I had more time to work on it. So I was emailing a lot of people. I eventually came up with this strategy where I just recorded a sample and mastered it and everything. I learned how to edit audio and stuff like that, how to master to some extent. And I would just send these samples to a bunch of different publishers, authors that I found on Amazon. I would just go through Amazon, find books that were kind of popular, find who we can contact, send them the samples and whatnot. After a bunch of these emails, eventually I got through. But I also, at the ICNA convention, I was networking with a few publishers, few organizations. And
that's good.
Yeah. Dr. Sabil Ahmed, who runs Peace in Chicago, he got my number from a guy whose business card I gave, and he was like, "Hey, I have this book. I want to do an audiobook for it. Would you be able to do that?" I was like, "Sure." So we ended up, we talked it through. I did that one. That one's there's been some issues with the upload, but should be out, inshallah, within the next couple weeks to a month. And then Sapiens Institute in the UK, they were one of the first people I reached out to. So through some of the dawa work I did, sort of when I was at Penn, we can get into that later on, but essentially I had been tweeting about it a little bit, and I got connected with Brother Sabur Ahmed from IERA, and they were looking for people to do dawa in the US for their global dawa day last year for the World Cup. And I was like, hey, like, I connect with you. Like, I'm in Philly. Like, I run our dawa here. Like, is that good? So I got his number. We've been chatting a little bit. He was giving me some advice and stuff like that. So from him, I was able to get in contact with Hamza Zortzes from
UK
Sapiens Institute. And then basically he was like, yeah, we've been looking for someone to do the audio for a while. We just couldn't find anyone with the Arabic. And I'm like, perfect. Like, so then I did their recent book that just came out, Islam and Nihilism by Yusuf Ponders. That really, that was a joy to narrate. That book is really well written. He, Brother Yusuf diagnoses a lot of really good sort of issues in society about just general lack of meaning, lack of hope, this sense of like just degeneracy that's happening. And he diagnoses really well, explains how Islam solves a lot of problems. I thought it was incredibly beautiful. So then, like, once I got those two books in, I was just reaching out to a lot of people. I just about to finish another project, and it's just been starting to like escalate from there. So now I have like 3 or 4 books that I got to work on now coming up. So alhamdulillah, like it took me a while to actually get real paying clients. So I'd say I started around September 2022 working audio ilm with the app kind of didn't really work out. So then I'd say doing the outreach was around May. May was when it really was serious. And then it took me from there about 2 months to actually get my first paying client. I did like a short article for Sapiens Institute. So all in all, it took me probably 10 months to actually, before I earned a dime. So it was, and I'm really glad that it took so long. I'm really glad I had to go through all that because it meant that I got to appreciate the patience and persistence
exactly
with entrepreneurship.
In business, if you immediately start making money, if you don't have a hard time until much later, you don't really appreciate it. You're like, why is this happening? If you have the hard times at the beginning, later on when things get good, everything is gravy. You're like, okay, this is not a problem. Yeah. It's like, alhamdulillah, I'm doing good now. Even if you have a hard patch, you're like, well, I've been, I started off with a hard patch. So, that's the good thing. So, alhamdulillah.
Yeah. No, alhamdulillah. And also just like with entrepreneurship, like one of the things that really helped me is the fact that I had good people. Like, alhamdulillah, like one of the skills I've been able to develop is networking with good people. And through just friends that I had, I was able to reach out with more friends who just helped me out. And I found that Muslims are very accommodating. They want to help each other out. I also think Americans do in general. I think that's why our country is so good at innovating, is because people support each other. Like there's this culture of like supporting new ideas, supporting creativity that I think a lot of people don't appreciate. Like it's actually not like that in a lot of other places. Like my mom has a friend who lives in the UK, and she was saying like in the UK, it's not as much. Like there's a sense of like, you have to kind of stay in your place. Like it's more classist in that sense. But like, in America, we don't really have that. Like people are willing to fund, like if you come with some idea, people are willing to fund that. Sometimes that can be dumb. Like people fund like, this is actually why like the tech industry got into trouble. They funded a bunch of like dumb startups and then people lost a lot of money. But no, alhamdulillah, there's this one brother, his name's Mujahid Muhammad. He, mashallah, brilliant entrepreneur out of Baltimore. He does a lot of work for the community there too. Really awesome dude. And he was the one who sort of encouraged me to sort of go for it with the audio room. And he's been giving me a lot of advice, and he's been incredibly helpful. And then the guy I mentioned, his name is Raam Fadl, founder of Halo Cars, which was acquired by Lyft. Great brother, mashallah. And he's been a great mentor of mine. And I think having good people in your corner is incredibly important in anything you do.
No, alhamdulillah. That's good. It's good. Like the brother you're saying, his company got bought out by Lyft. The experience he must have had, the mistakes he must have made, he can tell you from his experience and really help you out. And, essentially that's the way Muslims should be. It's, even if you see a non-Muslim person who's trying to do business and they're struggling, you let them know, hey, why didn't you do this? This would be a better move for you. Um,
Yeah.
because risk is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah's gonna give it to everybody. So you should never think like, oh well, I'm not saying give your trade secrets away, but you can still help somebody without giving your trade secrets away, and guide them on the right path. In Pakistan, we have this phenomena where you would have something called like a paper market, where everybody is essentially doing the same thing. Everybody's selling wedding cards, everybody's selling books and stuff like that, and all 100 shops are right beside each other in the same market. And that's essentially the purpose of that market, is if you need something paper based, that's where you go. So people would be like, well, wouldn't it make more sense to set your shop here or there? It's like, no, that's just the way they do business over there, and it works for everybody. People have been in business in that market for generations now, and everybody's doing well. It's just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who sends the risk. So alhamdulillah, it's good. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in audio ilm. So tell me a little bit about your dawa work, like the dawa table, how you do it. Obviously you've connected with some people, you spoke about that, but just in general, tell us a little bit about your dawa work, what drives you, what motivates you, and what do you do when you see, for example, you're a convert, right? Subhanallah, Allah bless you, you're a convert. But converts and born Muslims who are practicing or follow some sort of orthodoxy, when they see somebody who isn't practicing, or somebody who's maybe, misinterpreting Islam and telling people that this is what they think is Islam, it does hurt us. So, how do you deal with that? So tell us about the dawa table, your experiences, and then tell us about the anti-dawa. How do you deal with that?
The anti-dawa, yeah. So the dawa work, I've been wanting to do dawa for a while, like when I was just passionate about sharing Islam, right? It first happened, I was at the ICTA convention the previous year, so not this last one, but the previous one. And Brother Muhammad Hijab gave like a little dawa, sort of overview, and then we all went on the harbor and we're giving dawa to people.
Where did he give the dawa overview?
He gave it in the ballroom, I think. It was like upstairs. Okay. And he was giving, it was just like a brief overview on like how to get down and stuff like that. I'd already like seen a lot of like the eye era stuff, so I kind of knew a lot of the sort of techniques. I just had never really done it, at least in terms of like the street context. So then like a bunch of brothers, we were all out there, and there was this one guy, and he ended up taking Shahada. Like we were giving dawah to him, and he took Shahada. And so from there, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like I want to do this. Like this is really fun. Like it's awesome to share.
I was there that year as well.
Oh no way! Yeah, you come every year?
Huh?
Do you go to convention like every year?
Well, I've only been going for 2 years, but I was there last year and the year before, and the year before when I got COVID from going there. As soon as I got back home, I was sick.
SubhanAllah.
But go ahead. You were saying you guys were at the harbor giving dawah. Somebody accepted Islam.
Yeah, somebody accepted Islam, and so I did the Shahada and whatnot, and I was like, wow, this is a great experience. And me and my close friend, we were like, we should do this. Like we should start a committee at our masjid to give dawah and whatnot. And it didn't end up going through just because we did the proposal and everything like that, but it was just a lot of like, it became like kind of like slow and like sort of the meeting approach. And I was like, I sort of had to reconsider it. I'm like, I don't think this is a good way to go about it. So when I got to college, I realized that there was no one really doing dawah. Like it wasn't really a thing. Like some of the brothers had gone and done like Why Islam events. Like they'd given dawah like on a street corner before, but it wasn't like a consistent thing at all. And I was like, I got on our MSA board. There was an open spot. I interviewed. They accepted me. And I basically just was like, screw it. Like, let's just do dawah. And so I literally just I had some Qurans from my imam back home. And he just gave me a box. I brought it up to school. Just put out a table on Locust Walk, which is like the main walkway of campus, and I just was like, all right, I'm just gonna start giving dawah. I was like, just like, because the thing is like, this is sort of, and it kind of goes back to the business thingy too. Like with any business, you have to test the idea first. You can't just like some people fall in. I made this mistake where you get learn, you basically you do like useless work. Like you do like the meetings and like the talk about how we might maybe go about giving dawa, or like what are some good pamphlets we can, or it's like, no, you just have to go out there and do it. And then you can figure all that stuff out later, because once you get the momentum going, right? So then we set up our table, and we, it was, and so I just did that first day, and maybe 8 people came by, explained basics of Islam to them. It wasn't great, like it's kind of robotic, cookie cutter, but a few people took Qurans. It was a success. I mean, the thing is with Dawah, like we've had recently, like you have bad days. Like there'll be days where like maybe 3 people come by the booth. Half of them are just Muslims who are like, oh, assalamualaikum, or whatever. And then, but at the same time, any single day that somebody new has heard the message of Islam is one more person that has heard it, you know? And so that's a success. And it might be that the person accepts Islam or whatever, but that's kind of the goal, is just to sort of get the message out there. And so after that table, we had later on, we had this thing called Islamic Discovery Series, which we just had yesterday, actually. And it's like an annual thing where we try to like educate people about Islam. We try to spread the word more. We have our Jumu'ah outside, and it's meant to just sort of get the non-Muslims on campus to be like, oh, this is Islam. This is what Muslims do. Yeah. So that's when we kind of started making it a more weekly thing. So every week after Jumu'ah, we'd set up this table. We have a bunch of Qur'ans. We have pamphlets. Why Islam gave us like a banner. Like our old president had some connections at Why Islam, and so he was able to get us some stuff. And so we have these Qur'ans. We just be standing there like, ask me anything. I'm a Muslim, whatever. People come to the booth, they ask us questions. We talk about Islam, share the message. And within like 2 months, we had a brother take Shahada. Like he was actually didn't even go to Penn. He was literally a high school student on like a school trip. He's walking by and he's like, I'm thinking about Islam. Like, I really like it and whatnot. Like, I'm really considering it. And I was like, would you be interested in accepting it? And he's like, I know. I was like, do you believe that there's one God? And he said, yeah. He's like, do you believe that Prophet Muhammad was his prophet? And he said, yeah, I do. And I was like, well, you're basically already Muslim then. Like, that's what we believe. He's like, would you like to affirm it and accept it? He's like, yeah. And so then he took Shahada there. And then that was like a big boost, because it was like, we're only doing this for like a month, right? It's like someone's already accepted Islam. We're like,
parents, keep your kids away from David on college visits.
We had some fun. I can tell you some funny stories, but like we can get to that in a sec. But yeah, there actually have been like little kids that have walked up to the Dawah booth, and like their parents are like watching them, like, what is going on? Like they brought my friend who partners with me, he's like, what? Like these parents must be like, who are these guys? Like trying to get our kids, like, but so from there, yeah, we were just doing every week. And this one of my good friends, this one brother, like, he came up to the booth one time. He's like, yo, can I give Dawah with you? I was like, sure, why not? And he gives Dawah with me for like 2 months, or like 2 weeks or 2 hours. I'm sorry, that day. And he's like, David, like, this experience is incredible. Like I love doing this. Like, this has been amazing. And we've been doing Dawah together as like a tag team, like ever since.
Alhamdulillah.
And yeah, like every week we'll be the ones setting it up. We coordinate. We talk about like logistics and stuff like that. We ended up getting at Why Islam, we were able to get our own banner. So they made a custom Penn MSA banner that we put on our thing. And it's been interesting because you talked about, we could segue this now into the non-Muslims thing, or the Muslims thing. A lot of the people that grab Qur'ans are actually Muslims, right? They're like, is this in English? And we're like, yeah, it's in English. They're like, oh, I've actually read it. Like, I want to read it. I'm like, huh. And it'll be like Muslims. Some of them will be like religious and practicing. Yeah. Like, there are a few sisters, like one of them ended up joining our board, and she like was one of the people that just grabbed the English Quran. Interesting. Like, and so it sort of saw that like, okay, people hadn't really learned that much about Islam. A lot of people, I've had Muslims come up to the booth who were like, yeah, I'm kind of looking to get back into it. Like, I don't really know where to start. Like, how can I help? And so the booth has kind of been like it's been a weird thing, because it sort of had an intended effect that we didn't even think of. Like, our goal was to convey Islam to non-Muslims and, go viral on YouTube now, but like arguing, like, but No, and then all these Muslims started coming up, and they're asking questions and stuff like that. Like, oh, how do I know? So we're like, this is kind of an interesting development, and it's like, I think college. The reason why I wanted to especially target college campuses is college is like a lot of young people are open to new ideas. College is a really good, important time where people try to figure out who they are, and Islam helps solve a lot of the problems that they're having, that a lot of young people are facing, and so it's the prime thing. It's the prime thing to sort of convey to them. And we've had a lot of people that are just generally interested in religion, generally interested in faith, come up, ask good questions, come away very interested in learning more. So alhamdulillah, it's been a very positive development, and it's something. It's hard, like I'd say the hardest part is initiating conversations, just because it gets shy. Like once we're actually starting, like I've done enough where I know how to talk to these people about Islam and whatnot. Like that's not something I struggle with, but it's just starting the conversations can get a little difficult.
Alhamdulillah, that's good. That's good. I mean, it's nice to see younger converts having the confidence and being able to go out there and be Muslim, without any fear or any worries or anything like that. That's a good thing, because one of the things amongst Muslims, I know, I was born and raised as a Muslim, and I saw my father. So my father, before, he used to wear like Western clothing, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. You see, I'm wearing a t-shirt, pair of jeans, and stuff like that. Then my dad got laid off from his job, and he started his own business. And ever since he started his own business, I guess he found this liberation where he switched back to the Pakistani dress, which is the kurta shalwar.
MashaAllah.
And he wears that like 85% of the time. The rest of the 15%, he'll be wearing a thobe, the long, the long dress, which is worn in the Middle East. And that's just all he wears. You'll never see him in public with like, maybe if he's like pulling some weeds out or something, but you won't see him in public in like a pair of jeans. I don't think he's owned a pair of jeans in like 35 years or something. So at least that long. So, that's just one perspective of it. But because I grew up seeing him like that, seeing my mother wearing a hijab, for me, it was never like going out in the public. I never wanted to hide who I was. I don't see a reason to. I wear a kufi all the time, and it's not because I'm balding. I am balding, but that's not why I wear it. I've been wearing it since I was a kid. And so if I go out in the public and people do ask me, "Are you Muslim?" I'm happy to tell them yes. And if they have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And, people have become Muslim, taken the Shahada. I won't say they become Muslim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives hidayah. But they've taken Shahada because they found out I'm a Muslim. That was the natural course. They go, okay, I want to become a Muslim. So like one guy, he came into my shop today, actually. And he walks in and he sees me. I have my kufi on, the same kufi. And he's like, "You're a Muslim?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, I just moved out from New Jersey." I'm like, "Okay, which masjid are you going to?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going to this masjid, so-and-so." He's like, "But I was memorizing the Quran up there." He's a younger guy in his 20s in New Jersey with the sheikh. He's like, "I want to find a new sheikh to memorize with." So because if we don't hide who we are as Muslims, we let people know we're Muslim. Sometimes those people who are struggling, or sometimes those people who may not be struggling, but if they don't get connected, they may start struggling. We can be there for them. So your dawah table, very much so, is a connection, is an electric socket for people looking to recharge their iman. And,
what is that? It's like, that's kind of the goal. But also, it's just funny because a lot of people come up and be like, "You're Muslim?" They'll see me at the... kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. But
you don't wear your sword around campus, so they don't know.
No, I think 100%. Like, I think a lot of people they don't know who to ask those questions to. Because, like, if you don't really know the Muslims or you don't know the MSA, like, who would you go to? But,
well, I mean, to be honest with you, a lot of, like, born Muslims, their parents repressed publicly displaying that they're Muslim, right? By means of name, by means of diet, by means of everything, right? Some people just found it despicable to be from a different country. Like, they came to this country and they wanted to be, excuse my language, there's no insult meant by this, but they wanted to be white, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they did, right? Some people, they didn't want people to find out they're Muslim. So if people would ask them, "Oh, are you from Pakistan?" Be like, "Oh no, I'm from India." If they asked them, "Oh, what's your name?" If it was Muhammad, they would immediately go to Mike, right? Things like that. And then you would ask them, "Why do you go by Mike?" "Oh, well, people can't say Muhammad. I don't want them to disrespect the Prophet's name. I love him so much." And you can't really say anything to that. You're like, you don't want to disrespect the person, but you're like, that's such a BS reason. It's like if they mispronounce it, at least they're trying. I was like,
Yeah.
American people, white people, black people, whoever is from America, they're very respectful. They'll try to pronounce your name. They may even say sorry beforehand, like, "Oh, if I mispronounce your name, I'm sorry." So it's not the fact that you need to hide anything. And American people generally like the bold truth. If you tell them who you are, and if they ask you about religion, and you're like, they ask you, and you tell them, "Hey, look, we believe in Jesus, but we don't believe he's the Son of God," they'll actually respect you more for that than if you beat around the bush. So, from my experience, has been that always be honest with them, be open with them, and tell them who you really are, and they'll
Mhm.
appreciate you and respect you more, and they'll learn from you. But if you hide it, they're a little bit more like skeptical. It's like, why is he hiding something from me? Am I a person you have to hide something from? And that's just been my experience. So when you have a lot of these people from overseas who have sort of repressed who they really are, um, you know, changed the way they live, didn't really teach their kids about Islam or being Muslim or anything like that. This is why you find, your social media influencers or your famous celebrities. Like, for example, I'll just use this one example, Hassan Minhaj, the comedian, right?
Yeah.
He's married to a Hindu, right? Which is
He
a sin.
actually, ironically, he goes to my roommate's masjid.
No, because alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him and make it easy for him.
Yeah.
But what's it called? But he is married to a Hindu, right?
Yeah.
That's very problematic. When he does comedy, a lot of his comedy, unfortunately, he's trying to be funny by using the deen and making fun of it. You can make fun of your experiences. Like if you've had a bad experience, you can joke about that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But using the deen as a joke, because one time he was on with Keith Ellison. I don't know if you ever saw that interview, and he's like making a dua. He's like, "Oh, let's make dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from women in yoga pants," and things like that. And you're like,
Yeah.
why are you using the deen, the religion, as a crutch for your comedy? There's never a reason
Yeah.
for that. But some people have just grown up like that, or experienced life like that, where they're afraid of the reality, so they mask it one way or the other. And he may be a very good brother. I don't know. I've never met him. I'm sure he's very sincere. But there's certain steps he's taken, other people have taken. There's other social media influencers out there now who are Muslim, and they've married Hindus and stuff like that. And this is a problem coming from the Pakistani Indian background. And the reason it happens is because the Pakistani people have pulled all the religion out of being Pakistani, and all they've left is culture. And when that's all you leave, essentially the Hindu people who are from India, their culture is almost the same. Their food is
Yeah.
very similar. So when you take the religion out of it, your son or daughter would be like, "Well, I can marry a Hindu. We're very compatible." When in reality, religiously speaking, it's not even acceptable. But in reality, you're not very similar. But it's just that when you've removed the religion, from the canister, all the canisters look about the same. So
Yeah.
that's just
No,
the truth of the
100%.
matter.
No, I think you touch upon a really important point, which is that like the culture, like people talk about like, oh, the influence of culture on Islam, and they talk about it in this purely like negative sense of like we have to get rid of all that and have just pure Islam. It's like that's not really possible. Like you can't do that completely. Obviously, Islam, like if there's certain practices, like if people are like, I don't know, doing like crazy stuff that's just not allowed in Islam, then it doesn't really matter what your culture is. Like you can't do that. Like Islam has clear rules on certain things. Like I'm an American, right? Like there's a big party culture, drinking, right? It doesn't matter. Like, oh, it's part of our culture. No, like you can't drink. Like that's not allowed. So, but at the same time, like you do have to have a sense of the fact that like culture is going to mold how people practice Islam. Like, and that's okay. And I think what's kind of happened in America is people haven't really respected that fact. And I think a huge part of that is because I think the arrival of Islam in the West is kind of unique historically in that you have mass groups of people coming for non-religious reasons, and also like many different ethnic groups. Like if you look at historically, like when Islam spread to like sub-Saharan Africa, it wasn't like, you know, like thousands upon thousands of Moroccans were just moving to Mali or whatever because of economic reasons, and then, you know, they're like trying to like keep their culture, but also like kind of have this weird like assimilation sort of like flip-flop phenomenon. It wasn't really like that. It was kind of like, okay, like a few people visited, they would explain Islam to people. Eventually the people would accept Islam and kind of make it their own. So I think that's one of the hardest things to deal with in America that we face with, and especially like coming as like a American white convert, like, is the fact that like especially white converts have this sort of cultural backlash because they don't see a historical sense of Islam. So like when they convert, it's like, okay, like what do? We have to make something new, essentially. So, or they'll just try to copy other people. So like this is why you see like the white dude who'll be like wearing a topi and like he's got shalwar kameez and whatnot. And he might know a little bit of Urdu or whatever. Now it's perfectly normal to learn other languages, but it's just like it just comes across as weird. And it's like you're trying to be something you're not. And I think that we have to create sort of a sense of like an American Islam where like, and I try to do this, like I've been trying to sort of bring back a lot of the positive elements of American culture that have existed both historically and today. So like, I think one of them is dress. I think American dress has deteriorated a lot. Like if you look at old photos, people wear like very nice clothes all the time. And it was just normal. Like you were wearing like, you know, like this whole like designer phenomenon where people like the brand names and stuff like that. It's a very new thing. And so I try to wear like nice clothes when I'm out and about. And oftentimes people will ask me questions about that. And they'll be like, why are you wearing like, what's the occasion or whatever? I'm like, there is no occasion, you know? And oftentimes they'll be a positive reaction. And I explain like the Islamic reasoning. They'll be like, oh, that's interesting. So it's like,
I think one of the problems, you know, I was discussing with Tyler is the current American culture, which you see normally, right, on the streets, is so far, like honestly speaking, is so far from like what like maybe 50, 60 years ago, the sort of modesty, the sort of like, you know, classical, you know, how can I put it? The classical norms of how you treat people and stuff like that. And it's not the fault of like white American people or anything, you know. It's just the way that America's devolved over the last like 30 years or so. It's if you're doing something like that, you know, wearing nice clothing, it's loose and it's modest, right? Loose and modest, you know, or you're, you know, when you're eating something, you know, something proper. You're not trying to eat, you know, genetically modified food and stuff like that. For a lot of people, they'll be like, "Oh, you're just being weird," and you're not doing anything foreign. You're doing stuff that American people did. It's just you're doing it stuff that happened pre-1990. For people, that's weird because they're like, "Oh, keep up with the times."
Yeah, actually, yes and no. I think with the dress in particular, people still do wear nice clothes on occasions, but like people generally you just get respected more if you are dressed out. It just shows you care, you know. Like I think people say like, oh, you don't judge a book by a cover. It's like the reason why people say that is because we naturally do as humans. Like that's just what happens. Like you see somebody and like, you know, they're in, I don't know, say something like something that's massive, like they're jacked. You're probably gonna be a little bit scared of them to some extent.
Yeah.
Like you can't really control that. It's just your natural reaction as a human being. Like if I see Mike Tyson walking down the street, I'm probably not going to want to pick a fight with him, you know? I can know nothing about boxing, but it's still like, it's just so I think that, where was I going with this? But I think having that sort of sense of like, okay, Islam is meant to keep the good aspects. Because I think if you talk to most people, they would probably agree with these points to some extent. I just think that, like, I think we've lost a lot of beauty in America, in a sense, where it's like...
Well, I mean, the reason I was saying about the dresses, if you look at the big corporations now, they're like, oh, we don't want people wearing, you know, dress clothing to work, right? We want them to feel comfortable. So you see everybody who works at, like, all these big companies like tech companies, which is California is all tech companies, unless of course they become hybrid now. Everybody's wearing like joggers and like an old T-shirt to work, and it's just like it looks like they're wearing their pajamas to work.
It's just like it's like degeneration. It's like devolve.
Exactly.
It's a great word, devolve. Like it's sort of, and it's like I think subconsciously you have to be like, look, this just looks dumb. Like, everyone just looks like it just looks like it just feels like low. And it's not to say in like an elitist sense, but it's just how it is. Like if you make a build, if you just, I mean, as human beings, like we just naturally recognize this. Like if you build a house and it looks like crap, it just shows that you don't really care. But like if you build something, you put a lot of detail in it. It's like, oh, that's weird. Like it doesn't have any functional purpose. It's like, no, but at the same time, like that's just part of what makes human beings unique. Like we like to, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put this in us where it's part of the fitrah. Like we like to see beauty. Like what is it about like a waterfall or like a really cool waterfall that should make us go in awe? Like just water falling. But it's different, you know. Like, if you see like a really cool scenery, it's something about the human mind. Like we just like to see beauty. That's why every single civilization, we know them for what they built and then what left behind, like the cool buildings they built, like the cool thing. Even if that might not have been very functional to spend 200 years in the European sense, like building a church, like that has spiritual value to people. Like they care, like, and so. I think that on a deeper level, if you talk to most people about this, they would kind of agree with that point. So I think if you can associate Islam with something positive in that sense, it all goes back to the hadith. It's not adding new things to religion. It's just goes to the hadith. Like Prophet said, like Allah is beautiful and loves beauty. So that's kind of one thing I tried. And so like part of that, like I wear like a suit for Jumu'ah like every week. Like, that's the thing I do. Suit and tie. And it kind of reminds me of like when I went to church a few times, like every single person at a church, you never even think to wear like sweatpants or anything like that. It would just like weird. But at the same time, like when I go to the masjid or like when we have Jumu'ah, I've seen people pull up in like compression shirts. I'm like,
yeah, I was at Jumu'ah the other day and I noticed the way some people look. I'm not going to say I dress up the best. I don't dress up as nice as you, but I like to dress up at least clean, right?
Yeah.
It's just like people are coming to Jumu'ah, and this is the only day they're coming the whole week for prayer, right? To the masjid. I'm not saying they don't pray, but the only time they're showing up to the actual house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're showing up in their pajamas, and I'm like, come on, man, you can try a little bit harder.
Pajamas?
Yeah.
Wild.
Like not night suit pajamas, but like, sweatpants for gym or something like that.
Yeah, it's just like
that's just not the move.
It's just not. It just feels like, but yeah, no, it kind of.
But anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up. What's it called? Otherwise, we're gonna keep. Otherwise, I'm gonna keep dragging it. But are there any final thoughts you would like to share?
Yeah, I would just say keep an eye out on my Twitter and my Instagram. It's at the real Doy99 DOY, okay. And I'll have updates on the audiobooks I'm releasing. They should be coming out soon, and you can listen to them. They should be on Audible coming in the coming weeks. And
Inshallah. You don't have what was that one platform they had that was for like Republicans?
Well, there's a bunch.
I forgot what it was. It was the one where like Donald Trump went to after he got banned on Twitter.
Oh, Truth Social? Yeah, no, I don't.
You don't have that? Okay.
No.
Maybe we should send Brother Robert on to there. Go recruit some people to Islam. Probably end up getting into fights or something.
Their whole thing was like they don't censor people, and then they just started being like the anti old Twitter where they would just ban everyone who wasn't like conservative. So it's just like you have the same problem of banning people. It's just like they're the people. But anyway, no, I don't have a Truth Social.
But Jazakallah khair for your time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of your efforts. May He put barakah in your life, and may He help you on your journey, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. You as well,
Okay.
brother. Thanks so much for having me.
Inshallah. No problem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.